Howdy, and welcome back to another episode of World Bigfoot Radio.
All right, the Cryptid Report comes on in, Super Duke, always bringing us some spooky story from the nether regions of the forests and jungles from around the world. How you been doing, Super Duke?
Hey, Dave. I'm exhausted. It's been a very long, it's been a very long day. I'm vetting new roomies here again to replace the defective one I got stuck with. And so they've been in and out of the place all day long while I'm trying to get other things done. So it's like really wearing me down. But in the process of all the other things that were going on today, I was reminded of several interesting things. And, talking about this time of the year, we're just after the big spooky Halloween and all that kind of stuff. And in February, the second week in February, 50 years later, and I'm supposed to be some kind of knowledgeable about all these different cryptids and subvarieties, and I still don't know what the hell I saw. So much for being an expert. And it bothers me. Yes, the only good that came out of that is that I had somebody who was like Sabila Irwin, very good, used to be a police forensic artist and still had all the computer program for it, so they can make faces that look like faces without using a pencil. And he did a recreation of it for me. And aside from giving me more PTSD, because the closer it got to looking like it actually looked, the scarier it was every time I had to review it. The only good that came out of it is that, of course, I made it public, and I had, over the course of the next 2 years, 3 other people from different parts of the country contacted me and went, I saw that thing. I don't know what that is, but that's exactly what I saw. Where did you see this? And then we're like, yay, very small club, but at least somebody else has seen this damn thing, whatever it is. So, ongoing mystery there. But I'm also reminded that a few months later in the fall, right around this time of the year, 50 years ago, there was a very pivotal TV show, and a lot of people talk about, especially cryptid researchers and stuff, being influenced by In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy. And yeah, he was cheating. He was using all of the computerized sensor systems on the Enterprise and scanning the Earth's cryptids, and then didn't want to break the Prime Directive and let us know stuff too early, so only gave us certain information on it. But anyway, a lot of people were, very much influenced by In Search Of. Well, there was another show that wasn't In Search Of, but that was really influential with a lot of people my age, and other cryptid people will tell you about it. And this was just a TV show that was a scary TV show called Kolchak the Night Stalker, Kolchak. And this guy was an independent news reporter who wore the crappy white suit and the white shoes, and he had his little straw hat, and he had his little case that he'd carry around, and he had his camera with him. And he worked for the Independent News Service, which, at the time when there was no internet, most of the news was being run by the big mainstream media, the big newspapers, the big news TV channels, radio stations, and whatnot. But there was still this independent news service, which little reporters would go run around and dig up interesting stories. and try and write them up. And if they were interesting enough, they'd sell them to the bigger outlets, and then they'd make money off that. So that's what the character Carl is supposed to be doing. Now, Carl has really good senses as far as researching things and really bad luck at running into things that he shouldn't. So the whole gist of the show is that he keeps running into things like eight undying immortals, vampires, lizard men in tunnel systems underneath cities, and horrible things like this. And he finds out that there's something weird going on. He starts researching it more. He starts realizing there's some kind of weird paranormal supernatural monster thing going on. And then he gets more information on it. He does all the research himself, just like modern day cryptid people do. And then he tries to, of course, go to the cops and tell them, hey, there's monsters out here. And the cops go, ha ha, Carl, get lost, you crazy lunatic. I don't care if you got pictures. You're making stuff up because you're trying to make a buck off your crazy stories. And he gets the same kind of thing from his main boss that he works for and everything. And of course, by about halfway through the show, he's figuring out that nobody's going to help him and that he's going to have to deal with the monsters himself, which most of the time he does successfully. Get rid of the monster too yet. And I used to love this show when I was a kid. I just thought it was so entertaining. It was so well written. Darren McGavin played the part of Carl Kolchak, and he is great at looking like he's just whizzing himself with terror. So he was the perfect guy to play the part of this intrepid journalist who was super tough up until the moment that he saw the monster, and then he'd like want to whiz himself and run away inevitably, but he'd still pluck up the courage to defeat the monster anyway. So here's the upshot of this story. I realized that without intending to, I have become Carl Kolchak. Because what do? I research cryptids. I find out they're real. I get more information on them. I try and tell people. They think I'm crazy. And I put it out on the independent news service, which today is called the internet. So I have somehow become Carl Kolchak. And for any of you that haven't ever seen that, you can see most of the episodes still on YouTube. They're absolutely great. I highly recommend the Spanish Moss. I think it's Spanish Moss Mystery or something. Spanish Moss something or another. Go look it up. It's great. Really excellent.
Maybe you have to brush with death before you can really reflect on life, on the people and times that really meant something to you. Like childhood, dreams of sailing on silver seas in wooden shoes, visions of sugar plums dancing. Silver seas, sugar plums. The visions, the nightmares of a child are perhaps the most frightening and horrifying of any human animal can conjure. Some people who were in Chicago during the first stifling hot weeks of July would say that was so. If they were still alive. evidence for my theory was washed away through the Chicago Sanitary Canal. But why call it a theory? It was really a fact. How could it possibly happen? Well, they say that the mystics of India, while in a trance, can grow back severed fingers and move boulders with the power of their minds. It's documented. Somehow, Paul Langlois, in his special dream state, did even more than that. He created a palpable horror. When I contacted the sleep lab, they told me Dr. Pollock had lost his taste for pure research. He'd shaved off his beard and gone back to Long Island to work in the family shoe business. But what about Paul Langlois? The innocent test subject of that pure research? Well, he's just plain dead.
And so the other thing is that, well, you know, in the course of becoming this roving reporter, independent news service guy that's researching cryptids, you got to start somewhere. So I was thinking about that earlier today. You know, what's the first time that I ever interviewed somebody? When did that happen? And it occurs to me that actually that happened before I ever saw my first cryptid. And the person that I interviewed, anybody that's ever heard of the 7 degrees of separation, the person I interviewed gives me 1 degree of separation from Johnny Carson, Buffalo Bill Cody, and Custer. Now, what the hell am I talking about? Well, the first time that I interviewed somebody, I was 5 years old. And there was this guy that was going around doing a tour. He was very, very elderly. He had started out with Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, and he had been one of the extras that you can see in all the old silent movies where the natives come riding in to attack the cowboys. He was usually one of the guys on the horses. He was actually an Indian, and he had been in Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, and he was, in fact, an Indian chief for the Sioux. He got to tour all over with Buffalo Bill's Wild West show as long as that was going on. He went over into Europe, toured all over there, met the king and queen, blah, 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 came back here. And in his later years during the 1960s, he actually appeared on Johnny Carson. If you want to go Google image, you can see a picture of that. So this gentleman was most famous for what had happened when he was a little bitty kid. So I go to meet this guy. I'm 5 years old. I got my 4-year-old brother with me, so I'm tiny. And this guy looks like a giant to me, even though he's sitting in a chair and he's very old. He's got the full native chief regalia on, looks very impressive, has the weathered face. I mean, it just looks like the painting of the ancient Indian you would see, except this is flesh and blood, real life. This guy's 100 years old. I'm 5 years old. I want to ask him this question really, really bad. But if he jumps up and smites me or something, I'm afraid, you know, he's going to get me because he can reach me. He might have a hidden war club or something. So carefully making sure that my 4-year-old brother is nearby in case I have to shove him in front and run for it. I pluck up all my courage and I asked Chief Red Fox, who was at the Little Bighorn, "Did you get to scalp Custer?" And he looked at me like, was I serious? And he went, "No." And then I was incredibly disappointed, and I went, "Oh." And he got the hugest smile on his face. And right at that moment, my dad took a picture. He actually was there. He was a little kid when that happened. And after the whole battle was over, he was one of the kids who got tasked with dragging away anybody that was wounded that was still alive and picking through all the wreckage to see if there was anything usable and dragging that away too. So 1 degree of separation. So think about that now. This guy was alive and was there for the Battle of Little Bighorn, and I met him when I was a little kid. So a lot of times you like to think about things that happened in the Wild West being infinitely long ago, but really they weren't that long ago.
That is strange, Super Duke. Very, very strange. You know, I don't even know where to go with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, there you go. You know, that took like all the courage I had as a little 5-year-old kid to walk up to this, you know, living statue of the most impressive Indian chief you could see, sitting there giving me that look, and go, "Did you get to scalp Custer?" And the look on his face was just so surprised, you know. And then he got this huge grin because he didn't like Custer. And that was just at the point where public sentiment was starting to turn around and everybody was starting to go, "Well, wait a minute, we like totally screwed over these people and took their land away from them and stuff. And that really hadn't penetrated into the culture at all. And I think he was so thrilled to see this little blonde-haired 5-year-old kid being all indignant that he didn't get to scalp Custer. And yeah, he asked me a couple more questions, and I was like, oh yeah, Custer was a very bad man. Good that you guys got rid of him, something along those lines. I was only 5 years old, but I was always, when it came to playing cowboys and Indians, I was on the side of the Indians. I wasn't playing cowboys.
Well, there you go. There you go. How does this tie into the cryptids?
Well, there's a lot of reports of giants from North America and people digging up their bones, and some of them even being seen recently. And the one thing that always keeps coming up is, well, where's the skeletons? Well, there's these people at this place called the Smithsonian that keep dragging them away. And a lot of this stuff was actually found during when Chief Red Fox was alive and dug up and drug away. And let's not forget that up until the late 1800s, it was perfectly fine to talk about this stuff. As a matter of fact, Abraham Lincoln, during his address at Niagara Falls, made mention of, we're now seeing the same sight that the eyes of those giants that once ruled North America gazed upon. Where the hell did that come from? Now, nowadays, you would think the president was a total loony if he said that. And back in those days, everybody took it as, well, yeah, of course. Used to be giants. But then suddenly something changed, And so what was it that changed? And really what it was the Smithsonian. And if I can find the beginning of this part here, where it really talks about Powell. When Congress created the Bureau of Ethnology in 1879, Powell was named its first director, a post he held until his death in 1902, placed under the auspices of the Smithsonian Institution. And where did the Smithsonian come from? Well, there was a guy named Smithson who died without any heirs, had a ridiculously huge amount of money, and donated it to make museum and preserve history over here. And it's hilarious to note that Smithson's body was reburied at the Smithsonian Castle in the 20th century in a sarcophagus that lists his age at death as 75, when it's common knowledge he was closer to 65 when he died, so they can't even get that right. So anyway, because of his experience as a Western explorer, Powell was considered an expert on the geography of the American West and was asked to write a report on the history of the ancient tribes and their probable origins, which was to become the official policy of the Smithsonian for the next 100+ years. The title of Powell's first report to the Secretary of the Smithsonian in 1879 on limitations to the use of some anthropological data is revealing and shows the ulterior policy at work within the nascent institution. The following is taken from that report. Investigations in this department are of great interest, and I have attracted to the field a host of workers, but a general review of the mass of published matter exhibits the fact that the uses to which the material has been put has not always been wise. In the moments of antiquity found throughout North America and camp and village sites, grave mounds, ruins, scattered works of art, the origin and development of art in savage and barbaric life may be satisfactorily studied. Incidentally, too, hints of customs may be discovered, but outside of this, the discoveries made have often been illegitimately used, especially for the purpose of connecting the tribes of North America with peoples of so-called races of antiquity in other portions of the world. A brief review of some conclusions that must be accepted in the present status of the science will exhibit the futility of these attempts. And then Powell then goes on to definitively state there are no foreign influences to be seen or studied in relation to the Pueblo and mound-building cultures of the Americas that are believed to precede the American Indians. In relation to this dismissive comment regarding any connection to the lost tribes from the Old World, it's interesting to note that Powell was the son of a preacher in Palmyra, New York, who lost his flock to Mormon missionaries. So in the study of these antiquities, there has been much unnecessary speculation in respect to the relation existing between the people to whose existence they attest and the tribes of Indians inhabiting the country during a historic period. It may be said that in the Pueblos discovered in the southwestern portion of the U.S. and further south through Mexico and perhaps into Central America, tribes are known having a culture quite as far advanced as any exhibited in the discovered ruins. In this respect, then, there's no need to search for extraliminal origin through lost tribes for any art there exhibited. With regard to the mounds so widely scattered between the two oceans, it may also be said that mound-building tribes were known in the earliest history of the discovery of this continent, and vestiges of art discovered do not excel in any respect the art of the Indian tribes known to history. There is therefore no reason for us to search for an extraliminal origin through lost tribes for the arts discovered in the mounds of North America. Foremost among the wrong-headed theories Powell championed is evolution. So we're shown charts of man becoming bipedal and each new man becoming bigger and smarter than the last. This is, however, in direct contradiction to the charts we use for every other animal we study. I've only to look at a bird and be told that it was once a dinosaur to know how false this paradigm of man's growth is. Look at the evolution of most animals, and the record says they got smaller over time, not bigger. However, with all the modern edifices of education built on the theory of evolution of the growing stature of humanity, we can't very well have the Smithsonian running around telling people that we've degenerated from an ancient race of giants who once ruled America. Now, can we? The second theory current at the time was called uniform gradual history, a benign theory that says Earth goes along for huge spans of time with no catastrophes. The opposite of this theory is the more modern school of thought called catastrophism, based on the provable fact that disasters actually happen frequently and often. The record here in America speaks clearly on this subject. It relates not only to the disappearance of the Western inland civilization, dating back around 5000 BC, which was wiped out by volcanoes, but also to the sudden cessation of the copper trade around 1500 BC. Why is this significant? Because Cretan culture was wiped out in a series of catastrophes brought on by the massive explosion of the Santorini volcanoes on one of the Cretan Empire islands. I do not think it's a coincidence that in 1500 BC, the volcano wiped out the Cretan Empire, and the exodus in Egypt factors into this, and shut down the copper trade in America for almost 2,000 years. The third major contributing factor to the extant historical myopia is the land bridge theory, which states that all the Indian tribes reached America from Asia across the Alaskan land bridge. The man who came up with this absurd and unprovable theory is none other than Dr. Ailes Hrdlicka, the first curator of physical anthropology in the U.S. National Museum, now called the Smithsonian Institution.
Super Duke, I'm going to put you on hold right there. That's what I love, the Giants and Super Duke melding together on the Cryptid Report tonight. Melding. Never get to use that word. World Bigfoot Radio, Super Duke Sullivan continues the Cryptid Report on Spaced Out Radio right after this.
So there you go, running an agenda. Can't do real science, got to run an agenda.
I do have a question for you regarding that, but I'll wait till the show.
Oh, okay. Now I got several actual reports of them digging up these bones and stuff, and I'll end with, and then the friendly people from the Smithsonian showed up and hauled the bones away for later study. Yeah, of course you never saw them again.
No, of course not. Hey, Super Duke. You see that strange video of all those sheep in
going in a circle? I know, that's really weird. Very strange. Yeah, what's been freaking me out is that video of the guy that got the video of the giant walking on the mountain ridge up there in Jasper, and then did a bunch of follow-up videos on it, got threatened, and then mysteriously died. That's a little bit suspicious.
Yes. I've heard that 2 times in the last couple of days, and you're down the third.
There's like 3 or 4 channels that have already done full-length videos on it and showed all of his updates and videos and everything he posted too. And the report of his death, which has no cause listed.
Right.
And this guy wasn't old or anything. He was in his 30s probably, if that.
Yeah. The guy was from Whistler.
Yep. Andrew something, if I remember right.
Something like that. 1 second, Super. Surf JR, Pam, Lori, Thomas, and W. Decker, thank you so much for the super chats tonight. Very much appreciate the love. We're at 100 thumbs up. If you haven't done so yet, give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And if you're new, don't forget to hit subscribe. Good morning, Stephen Finnegan. And here we go with the final half hour. Round and third, we're headed for home tonight on Spaced Out Radio. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We very much appreciate it. Want to remind you that if you missed all of this show or others, check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do old Davey the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read Shirky Poo's Newswire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. We continue on tonight with the Cryptid Report from World Bigfoot Radio. Super Duke Sullivan is back with us. How you doing, Duke?
I'm doing.
You're always just doing, man. I got a question about the Smithsonian stuff you were just talking about. All right? Why would they be stealing bones of all these giants and just hiding them from us?
Well, yeah, that's the whole point that I was getting to right there. First of all, I got Powell with his dismissive and weird attitude on all this. And then shortly after he takes over the Smithsonian, they get this thing called the Powell Doctrine. Guess they named that after. And it had a lot to do with manifest destiny, because after the Civil War, they had plenty of nothing to do but go expand west and take over everything. So what they were trying to say is that the poor savages needed civilizing because they've always been living in dirt huts and eating, grass or whatever, and they have no civilization. So it behooves us to bring our tremendous and wonderful civilization to them and force it on them whether they like it or not. And one of the things that they wanted to make sure of was that there wasn't any evidence that any of the people on the continent had actually had a high civilization at any point, because then they wouldn't really need civilizing, would they? So that was one of the things that they were trying to cover up. And also, as it stated there in what I was reading earlier, the idea that there had been connections with North America from Europe at the time was just completely verboten. And nowadays we know that that's absolutely for a fact. The Sea People, Phoenicians, Atlanteans, whatever you want to call them, Minoans, at the same time that all of the trade in bronze was going on over in the Mediterranean, well, they had to get that copper from somewhere. And they have all these examples of the old things that were made at that time. And interestingly, for those unaware of it, copper can be traced even after it's used to make something back to its point of origin, but because they all have peculiar signature in them depending on where they were originally dug up out of the ground. And about 40% of that copper that made its way into all the copper and bronze things that the Minoan civilization was scattering all over the Mediterranean came from North America. No question about it. So how did it get over there if there wasn't any contact with North America during the time that these early civilizations were busy running around? See, and that's, again, they don't want that linkage made, so they're covering all this stuff up. We know for a fact now that there's a whole bunch of abandoned copper mines up around the Great Lakes. One of them's even got a stone slab on the right next to it that they discovered that's got carvings of, guess what, the Phoenicians on it. So this has all been about a massive cover-up of the actual history of North America to make it comport with what they wanted to tell the people. And that's why it went from, sure, there were giants, to, nope, there was no giants.
Of course not. Of course not. But where are these giants being seen today? I rarely hear reports of them in North America. A lot of them seem to come from the Middle East.
Yeah. I don't think there's necessarily more reports from over there, although it would make sense that there's still some of the giants lingering around the area of the Levant, because when the Israelites went to war with them, according to the biblical narrative, they managed to wipe out or chase most all of them out of their area. But how far are they going to chase them? How far is far enough? Are they going to keep chasing them to the end of the earth? Well, probably not. So at some point they're going to get in, the mountains around Afghanistan and Pakistan, perfect place for them to go hide. Nobody wants to live there anyway. And so who's going to go mess with them? And then the other thing is that there are reports from giants in North America, but they're just rare. Caveman Yazzie told me, it's coming up, I think it's like 2 years ago now almost, that he ran into somebody that told him that and this is a native guy, was in the Superstition Mountains and saw a giant. And he described it as not a Bigfoot, but like a giant caveman with, hide clothing and a club. And it was about 15 feet tall. And he said he's never, ever going into the Superstition Mountains again. And no, he isn't going to go on anybody's show and talk about it. But he was willing to tell caveman that that's what he saw, and that's why he's never going there again. And he strongly encourages everybody else to not go there. There's also the report that I gave earlier this year where I was contacted by an insider who had a relative that was actually involved in what was going on, where one of the parks abruptly got shut down in Colorado. And the very next day, What Lurks Beneath channel on YouTube did a report on this story that I had heard more or less secondary from the horse's mouth the day before. And he had most of the same details, not all the ones that I had, but he was talking about the same thing. So I went immediately and checked, well, how many parks in Colorado are shut down right now? There's 3. Well, how many have been shut down for like a couple of days and no more? Well, there was 1. I started paying attention to that one. And then about 2 days later, it abruptly opened up again. Well, the story that I had gotten is that there had been an incident, at least one park ranger and possibly some other people had been killed, and that they had to shut the park down, chase everybody out of it, call in military kill team. And with the exact words, what I was told secondhand from the person that was boots on the ground had described it as another Kandahar incident.
Oh, wow. So for people who may not know what the Kandahar incident is, what happened there?
Well, this is over in, I think it was 2003, early in the Afghanistan war period. And there was a Marine recon, or a group of Marines doing recon anyway. They were running around this one mountain area, and they didn't call back when they were supposed to and just vanished. So they sent in another unit to go try and find them. And they actually picked up their trail and started going up toward the mouth of this big cave up in the mountain. When they got up there, they saw a whole plethora of bones of various animals and what looked like military equipment, including a walkie-talkie that was lying on the ground outside the cave. When they got close to the cave, they heard this tremendous roar, and they were charged by what they describe as a half-naked giant man, about 12, 15 feet tall. He was wielding a pike with one hand and had red hair, white skin, probably tan. And he attacked them, ran the first guy in their group through with the pike that he was carrying, this big spear he had, and picked the guy up, still stuck on it, in the air, and was getting ready to rush at him and attack him again. And at that point, the shock wore off, and one of them yelled, "Fire at the face," which they all started doing, which again didn't bring him down immediately. It was when they brought the 50 cals to bear on his face that apparently they finally knocked his giant butt down. But they found the remains of the missing Marines there. They called in for, what do we do with a weird situation like this? They were told to just stay there and wait. And then a big cargo helicopter came in, dropped the cargo net. They loaded the body on the cargo net, and the cargo helicopter took off with it. So this story is actually backed up by the report of a guy who was there on the ground, claims this happened. And then another guy was at the Air Force Base when the copter came in with the giant's corpse in the cargo net and was put down, and then they loaded it onto a huge cargo plane to fly it out from there. And he was one of the guys that guarded the corpse on the cargo plane. So we've actually got this story from 2 different sources. And Steve Quayle got one of them. I think L.A. Marzulli talked to the other guy, if I remember right.
Right. So these giants, what do they look like? Are they humanoid, or do they look like you and me, except maybe with worse hairdos?
Pretty much. Yeah, it's the same description, and the same description as the giants of Lovelock Cave that Princess Winnemucca talked about, fighting with the Paiute tribe for about 2.5 years until the Paiutes won and killed them all. Again, same description, 12 to 15 feet tall, looked like giant white men, had long red hair and beards. Some of them 6 digits, 6 toes, 6 fingers, and double rows of teeth. And that's the classic description of the Nephilim. 6 digits, double rows of teeth. And that's one of the things that's come into a lot of people don't realize that one custom of the native tribes in North America, when they met somebody that they didn't know, they would hold their hand up. You know, they used to show that in all the old cowboy and Indian movies. Hold their hand up and say, how. Well, they weren't really, whether they were saying how or not, they actually did that. They would hold their hand up. And the reason was so you could look at their hand and count that they only had 5 fingers, not 6.
I never knew that.
Yeah, the guys with the 6 fingers were the bad guys. They were the ones that ate other people and lorded over their little minion slave humans that they had. The mound builder culture that they've been digging up in Mississippi, that's another good example of them hiding all this evidence and stuff, because they've been digging up giant skeletons out of these mounds for decades, you know, like over for a couple hundred years now. And in a lot of cases early on, especially, they carefully documented them. How big were they? What position were they setting in? You know, if you've ever seen like old archaeological sketches and stuff, they're extremely exacting and detailed. And a lot of them were the same thing over and over again. It kind of reminds you of the old Viking burials in Northern Europe, where the extremely rich lord would die and they would kill all of his slaves and retainers and bury them with them. And this was apparently similar to the same thing that was going on here. But in this case, the Lord was some giant that was, 7 to 12 feet tall. And all the retainers that were buried with him were just normal sized humans.
So around North America, where it is a colder climate, are these things putting fur on their back after, say, bear kills or wolf kills or something along those lines to stay warm?
Yeah, exactly. There's been a couple, 2-3 giant sightings up in Alaska too. As a matter of fact, Wes on Sasquatch Chronicles had somebody call him and tell him about it, and they wouldn't come on the show and talk about it because they're like, "Who the hell's going to believe this?" Hard enough for people to even believe there's 8 or 10 foot tall monkey-looking Bigfoot things walking around. Nobody's going to believe there's giants walking around. And what they're reporting is all the same thing. They look like cavemen. They look like huge, pasty white men with long red hair and beards and dressing in, furs and leather and that kind of thing, whatever they can make it out of.
Okay, so are they living in caves? Are they living underground?
Well, I would imagine, especially because most the ones that you get reported anymore are ones that are in really isolated areas, giant parks or huge forests out in the middle of nowhere. And, in places like that, first of all, they have to have lots and lots of food. So they need a big range. And if there's humans around to see them, then that's not going to work out very well. So they're going to try and be out in the middle of nowhere. And I would expect they do the same exact thing that the mountain giants and the Bigfoot and a lot of these other cryptids do in the colder climates. They all have underground layers. And that's extremely common throughout mythology all over the world too. All these big ogres and trolls and giants and stuff, they all have underground layers.
So it's like their own mini city down there.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what they've got available. And, these things are gigantic and super strong. If they want to excavate and make their own tunnel systems, they sure as hell can do it. And a lot of them probably just take advantage of pre-existing karst systems. States like Nebraska, where you don't really think about it, there's gigantic cave systems underneath it. You've got limestone and sandstone, and the water goes through it and just hollows out these massive undergrounds. Well, they can take advantage of that. And then you've got lots of evidence of not only places like the underground cities over in Turkey, which they're now starting to find were way more extensive than they think or thought, and that some of them are actually connected by tunnel systems. So there wasn't just like one huge underground city in Turkey. There was 5 or 6, and they were all interconnected. Well, these things are all made for people. Apparently, they're for the right size as people. But, why are you hiding underground? What is it on the surface that's making you hide underground? And then the other thing is that there have also been gigantic tunnels uncovered where the ceiling of the tunnel is 25, 30 feet up. And when you're talking about Stone Age primitive people with the supposedly primitive technology that we had at the time to excavate, why would you make anything that tall? You absolutely don't need to. There's no reason for it. And this was just in some kind of a service tunnel. It wasn't a show of extravagance, like making the entrance to a gigantic temple and making the temple look gigantic and everything, and showing opulence and power. This is just like a big tunnel that they had dug underground for some reason. They weren't mining any minerals out of it. And this is down in South America, and it was like 25, 30 feet tall. Why?
All right, Super Duke for World Bigfoot Radio has returned with an abbreviated cryptid report tonight. Duke, it's always a pleasure to have you here, my man.
Always fun to be here. And if anybody just strolls up to you on the street someday, Dave, and says, Dave, what do you think the ubicity of Sasquatch is? You may, with great certainty, tell them its ubicity is ubiquitous. Anyway, with that out of the way, I was digging around on some of my video from September last night, and doing some previous work for an upcoming show, and haven't got the guest on to record what all happened yet, but I got the video from it. And there was a piece of video where I went and walked up as Michael, my research assistant, dubbed it, the magical hidden stream. And unfortunately, as I started to walk up the magical hidden stream, I zoomed in to look at it, and then I didn't pay attention to the fact that I didn't zoom back out again. So most of that 7 minutes of video is unusable garbage until I get back down to the road. And I've still got it zoomed in, not very far, but I don't realize I've still got it zoomed in. And I go back down to the road, and I go across the road, and I start walking up the road to where the truck with Keith Crabtree is sitting, and he can't walk around the woods, so he's waiting for me. So as long as I'm walking up there, I start filming the ditch next to me on my left-hand side, which is very steep and goes down quite a ways, because that's right where there's a culvert that comes through and spews all this little stream downhill into the river. So it makes quite a racket too. So as I'm walking along, I'm just filming it, whatever. If there's anything there, I'll get it. I'll stop, film the stream, zoom in a little bit. Okay, that's all cool. So I'm looking at that part last night, and unfortunately, I wish I would have known there was something there and moved a little slower. But apparently there were several cryptids there, and the one that jumped right out at me was something that looks very canine, with its head sticking out from underneath a pine tree looking at me. You can see its snout, and you can see the left side of its face and its nice red eye, and you can see its fangs and its open mouth and its tongue. Does not look friendly. And so that made me go, well, I need to go through this frame by frame and see what else I can spot. And I've got Robin taking a look at it and several other people. Stephen Hill already got back, found 2 more Bigfoot in the background besides the one that I spotted. So there's several of them there. And this is really creepy, because while I'm up there on the hill walking around by myself in the woods, they should be following me around, right? No, they're sitting down by the truck where Keith is.
Oh, no.
Until I get back again. What the hell?
Oh, they're scared of you, Super Duke. They're scared of you.
Goobers, you're supposed to be following me around so I can accidentally get you on video.
You
I'm not trying to hide
sons
down
of
by the truck.
guns.
Damn it! Get out onto my lawn so I can film you. So anyway, other than that, other interesting thing that happened, just like yesterday, the latest video released from Small Town Monsters, Seth Breedlove. They're always fun. He makes good documentaries. Go check it out. This one I found particularly interesting. It's the coastal Alaskan Sasquatch. They're out on the Kenai Peninsula at somebody that I know's cabin, Scott, and they did the whole documentary on all the activity he was having there. And this is interesting to me because they had Rob Roy Menzies and the probably the best Alaskan Sasquatch tracker in existence, Lord Scott, on my show, and they both went out to this cabin and did a weekend there and came back with a track cast and a whole bunch of stuff that had happened, and actually put that out on my show almost 2 years ago. So this is a follow-up done with a big budget and really good cameras, and everything that we already told you guys is true. So there you go. But to get on with what we're talking about tonight, we got part 2 of the Giants. I gave you the whole background on the Giants and stuff last time. Well, this time we're going to hear some reports, and again, we're going to the ancient giants who ruled America and the missing skeletons and great Smithsonian cover-up by Richard J. Dewhurst, which is encyclopedic in its scope. And if you ever wondered where's all this stuff about all these old giants being found and stuff, this is the book you need to own. There may be other ones out there, but if you're interested in giants in North America, get this book. Here's an example. Ohio account of 9-foot giants from the Stevens Point Journal, May 1st, 1886. It is very evident that in an early day in the history of this country, this section of Ohio was an important camping ground for the American Indian, and indeed, discoveries are frequently made which lead people interested in the matter of prehistoric America to believe that a race of mankind superior in size, strength, and intelligence to the common North Americans of the forest flourished not only along the coast east and south, but right here in southern Ohio. There are in this country several burying grounds, and 2 of them are located 5 miles west of the city near Jasper, one on the farm of Mr. William Bush, and one on Mr. Matthew Marks' farm. In a conversation with a gentleman who has seen these skeletons unearthed at the Marks Bank, we are told that many dozens of human skeletons have been exhumed since the bank was first opened. Some of these skeletons have been measured, and the largest has been found to be over 9 feet long and more. At one time, 10 skeletons were exhumed. They'd been buried in a circle, standing in an erect position, and were in a comparatively well-preserved condition. One remarkable fact about all the skeletons unearthed at these places is the perfect state of preservation in which their teeth are to be found. Not a decayed tooth has been discovered, and this would seem to indicate that these people naturally had excellent teeth or some method of extraordinary manner in preserving them. So there you got one from Ohio. Now let's go to Winona, Minnesota. The history of Winona County, 1883. Indian mounds and relics are found in various parts of the township. Not long since, while some men were digging in Mineral Bluff, some 150 feet above the river, a skeleton of unusual size was unearthed. On measuring, the skeleton was found to be 10 feet in length, with other parts in proper proportion. In the skull was found a copper hatchet. Remember how we talked about the giants use copper weapons on each other? And a dart or arrowhead 9 inches long. 9 inches long. Another skeleton 9 feet long was found in the village of Dressbach while some men were digging a road or trench. These skeletons were of an unusual size to those generally taken from Indian mounds. Their size, form, and structure would lead those well-versed in paleontology to believe they belonged to a race prior to the Native Americans known here now. In many mounds have also been found copper hatchets, chisels, and various kinds of tomahawks and other weapons of war. Also, these antique races seem to have had some process for hardening copper unknown to any modern process. And this has come up since then with some of these things where they found these relics and went, well, this is like as if it was somehow tempered, like a tempered steel object that we'd make today. But we don't know how to do that. Where they came from, when they lived, and from whence they have gone is only conjecture and speculation. That they were mighty races skilled in the mode of warfare, understanding the mechanical arts, for all these we have conclusive evidence, but of their final end, we know nothing.
And we never know anything.
We never know anything. Well,
What
that's the fun part about science. You don't get to know anything for sure, absolutely. It's always more questions.
True.
So here we go. Colorado River, Nevada News, 1947. Near the Nevada-California-Arizona border area, 32 caves within a 180 square mile area were discovered to hold the remains of ancient, strangely costumed 8 to 9 foot giants. 8 to 9 foot. They had been laid to rest wearing the skins of unknown animals similar to sheepskins fashioned into jackets, with pants described by the discoverer as prehistoric zoot suits. Remember, this came out in 47. The same burial place had been found 10 to 15 years earlier by another man who made a deal with the Smithsonian. Ooh, the evidence of this find was stolen and covered up by Darwinian scientists. Dr. F. Bruce Russell had come to Death Valley from the East Coast for the sake of his health. He had taken up mining in the West and was exploring across the Colorado River into Arizona. What he found he described as the burial place of a tribal hierarchy within the ritual hall of an ancient people. He felt that some unknown catastrophe had driven them into these caves. All the implements of their civilization were there, including household utensils and stoves. Dr. Russell reported seeing hieroglyphics chiseled on carefully polished granite within what appeared to be a cavern temple. Another cave led to their sacred hall, which contained carvings of ritual devices and markings similar to those of the Masonic order. A long tunnel from this temple led to a room where Russell said, quote, well-preserved remains of dinosaurs, saber-toothed tigers, imperial elephants, and other extinct beasts were paired off in niches as if on display, unquote. 10 to 15 years earlier, the caves had been seen by another miner who had fallen from the bottom of a mine shaft. In his book, Death Valley Men, Bork related a conversation among residents of Death Valley concerning the local Paiute Native American legends of an underground city at Wingate Pass. After falling through the ceiling of an unknown tunnel, the miner had followed it 20 miles north of the Panamint Mountains to discover a huge underground ancient city. He saw arching stone vaults with huge stone doors and a polished round table at the center of their council chamber, which had once been lit by ingenious lights fueled by subterranean gases. Leaning against the walls were their tall gold spears. He said the designs of the thick golden armbands resembled the work of the Egyptians. The tunnel ended at an exit overlooking Furnace Creek Ranch in California's Imperial Valley. He could see from there that the valley had once been underwater. The tunnel entrance had been a dock or a quay located halfway up the side of the mountain now. A deal was made with the Smithsonian Museum for the find, but the miner was betrayed by his partner. The evidence was stolen and the entrance concealed. In a 1940 mining journal, another find was reported as much-worked gold found in an 8-mile-long cave near San Bernardino. University of Arizona professor Vine Deloria, himself a Native American, made a similar accusation against the Smithsonian for covering up the remains found within the burial mounds of the Mound Builders civilization. More on them later. Surviving diaries from before the time of Darwin attest to these discoveries. The Mound Builders were a different civilization than that of the Indians, they said. The mounds contained the remains of hundreds of giants, along with the bones of giant mastodons, etc. In Cincinnati, Ohio, the giant bones were found with large shields, swords, and engraved stone tablets. In Kentucky and Tennessee, the bones of, quote, powerful men of towering stature, unquote, were excavated. One of these 7-foot men was buried with an engraved copper plate beneath his head. A woman was also found, and she was wearing a silver girdle with letters written on it. The Detroit Free Press reported in 1884 the discovery in Gartersville, Mississippi, of the remains of a giant with waist-length jet black hair. He was wearing a copper crown. With him in his timber burial vault were his children, who wore garments decorated with bone beads. The tomb was covered with large flagstones engraved with inscriptions. In Cayuga Township, Niagara, there's a place called the Cemetery of the Giants, which was discovered in 1880. Those giants were 9 feet tall and appear to have died violent deaths. Their axes were found with them. Giant bones were also unearthed from a rock fissure on Lake Erie Island. In some of the finds of giant bones, the bones lay in confusion, as if left on a battlefield. The Smithsonian does display some artifacts of the mound builders found with the bones of the giants, shell discs and carved stone beads. Many of the bones turned to powdery ash within a short time of being exposed to the air, which is a mute testament to their great antiquity. The Smithsonian has been reluctant to test some less fragile finds. The late Vine Deloria said that it is because they, quote, might find a really early date for the bones, unquote, and that it would be distressing to their timeline. And then we get to the mound builders.
Sure.
Ancient monuments of the Mississippi Valley. Professor E.L. Lively and J.L. Williamson of Friendly have made an examination of the giant skeletons found by children playing near the town. The femurs and vertebrae were found to be in a remarkable state of preservation and showed the persons to be of enormous stature. Skeletons ranged in height from the largest being 7'6" down to the smallest 6'7". Skulls found are of peculiar formation. Forehead is low and slopes back gradually, while the back part of the head is very prominent, much more so than the skulls of people living today. In other words, cone heads like Paracas skulls. The legs are exceedingly long and the bones unusually large. The finding of the skeletons has created a great deal of interest, and the general impression is that the bones are the remains of people who built the mounds, the largest in the country being located in a town mysteriously called Moundsville in Marshall County. Now, if we go to Pennsylvania, we find a different kind of giant there. Charleston Daily Mail, September 20th, 1916. Sayre is a borough in Bradford County, Pennsylvania, 59 miles northwest of Scranton. The exact year is not clear, but during the 1880s, a large burial mound was discovered in Sayre. It was reported that a group of Americans uncovered several strange human skulls and bones. The skeletons belonged to anatomically normal men, with the exception of bony projections located about 2 inches above the eyebrows. It appeared the skulls had horns. The bones were characterized as giant, as they were representative of people over 7 feet tall. Scientists estimated the bodies had been buried around 1200 AD. The archaeology discovery was made by a reputable group of antiquarians, including Dr. G.P. Donahue, the Pennsylvania state dignitary of the Presbyterian Church, A.B. Skinner of the American Investigating Museum, and W.K. Moorhead of the Phillips Academy, Andover, Massachusetts. And this was not the first time a gigantic horned skulls were unearthed in North America. During the 19th century, similar skulls were discovered near Wellsville, New York, and in a mining village close to El Paso, Texas. At one time in history, human horns were used as a sign of kingship. Alexander the Great, in fact, is depicted with horns on some of his coins. In Moses' time, horns were a symbol of authority and power. Apparent pictures of these skulls do exist, and they have one in here, but many people claim the discovery to be a hoax. Conversely, many websites suggest that the objects are of extraterrestrial origin.
Oh, my. Mr. Duke, we have to call it the night right there on this abbreviated version of the Cryptid Report. But once again, absolutely amazing. I love the theme this week with everything to do with, you know, these long skull and bones, and where are they going? Is it the Smithsonian? Is it the government? Or is it in Super Duke's freezer? We will never really know. Well, maybe on the freezer we will. Super Duke Sullivan from World
Dungeon at my
Bigfoot
headquarters is full of the skeletons. Yeah, that's right.
World Bigfoot Radio can be found all over the internet. YouTube, BitChute, Rumble, and so many more places. When we come back, it's the thought of the day. Get off my lawn, people. Let's do this thing. Lots of show there.
When the moon hangs high on the breast of the lake, and the bite of the wind is like a slap in the face, a legend of horror lurks in the haze. It's Bigfoot. A giant of a creature, all covered with hair, as tall as a timber and strong as a bear. Y'all better not go walking out there with Bigfoot. Bigfoot's coming, gonna get you, gonna get you. Bigfoot's coming, so you better watch out. Lock your doors and bolt your windows. Bigfoot's on the prowl. Bigfoot's coming, gonna get you, gonna get you. Bigfoot's coming, so you better watch out. Lock your doors and bolt your windows. Bigfoot's on the prowl. This legend has grown about this big hairy man that walks all alone. A mountain monster 10 feet tall called Bigfoot. From the tales of the traders and trappers to the image on Indian walls. From the Bear Paw Mountains of Montana to the signs of the Great Shastas. From the Flatheads to Blackfeet and the Shoshones, he must have seen them all. And when the sun goes down in the northwest woods, if you listen, you can hear him call. Bigfoot's coming, gonna get you, gonna get you. Bigfoot's coming, so you better watch out. Lock your doors and bolt your windows. Bigfoot's on the prowl. Bigfoot's coming, so you better watch out. Lock your